Okay guys, I'm going to show you a use case for inverting intervals. Now, the way I learnt this was with standard notation, and here we have the 7 triads for the key of C major. Now, the reason I do everything in C major is because there's no sharps or flats to confuse the situation. But you can see here we have our triads. This is a C major chord. This is going to be D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, and then this is B diminished. These are triads because there are 3 notes, and you can see that if we use the cycle of thirds, we start on the C, for instance. C is the root, E is the third, and G is the fifth, so we get C, E, G. That's going to help us in a minute when we want to add another note onto this triad. We want to turn it into a 4-note group or a 7th chord. Let's look at the D minor. You can see it goes D, F, A, which tallies up with our cycle of thirds, which goes D, F, and A. This tertian cycle here, these are just the notes from the C major scale, just going round. And they are different minor thirds and major thirds. E to G, that's a minor third. G to B is a major third. B to D, it's a minor third. D to F, it's a minor third. F to A, that's a major third. A to C, that's a minor third. C to E, that's a major third. We have different types of thirds in here, but this is going to help you. And another question I get about this cycle of thirds, well, what if it's a different key? Well, all you need to do is add the relevant sharps or flats to this. So if this was the key of G, I'd just add a sharp to this F here, and then I would be hunky-dory. I would have the key of G there. Let's get back to this. You can see the E, G, and B here. E, G, and B, the root third and fifth of the E minor. Or to be a stickler, we've got a root, we've got a minor third, and then we've got a fifth. So root, minor third, fifth. On this F, we get F, A, C, root, third, and fifth of the chord F. When we get to the G, we get G, B, and D on the stave. G, B, D. This matches it all up here. Keep on going. A, C, E, that is for the A minor chord. A, C, E, that tallies up here. B, D, and F. B, D, and F. Now, you've got to be careful with this one because we've got a minor third with a minor third, which means between the B and the F, we get a diminished or a flat fifth. You want to think about it in that way. So we get a little bit of a variation in the structure of the triad there, and this is why we amend it with this diminished symbol here. So what happens if I want to add another note onto this? So if I want to go C, E, G, and I want to extend this in the key up to the 7th chord. I don't want the triad because it's too vanilla. I want to sound expensive and lush and classy. This is why we add 7th notes, because it makes your chords sound more bougie. So let's start with this C major triad, and we can see we get C, E, G, and the next one would be B. But let's tally this here. We don't even need to look at the stave. We could just use this cycle here, C, E, G, so that's the root, third, fifth, and then this B is going to be the 7th, and I'm just going to plonk that on top of there. So that gives me that 4-note group, and that is that 7th chord. That's the first one. Let's do them all. So look, D, F, A, C. So I just put that C in here. E minor. E is the root, third, fifth. D is going to be the 7th. F, A, C, E. Let's just add that onto that there. G, B, D, and then we go to the F there. Look, it's another way of doing it here, guys. We just use this cycle. A, C, E, G. The way that I remember this is every good band deserves fans and cash. You don't have to start on the E. You could start on any of these notes and make your own mnemonic up, your own way of remembering it. You might just remember the sequence. It's completely up to you. And a little story is I developed this way of thinking because I've got a kind of obsession with looking at vehicle number plates and seeing if they have chords in them, because I had a car when I was younger and it had C, E, G in the number plate, just like a C chord. And I couldn't get away from that kind of thinking. Back to the lesson. A, C, E. A, C, E, G. Right, so we put that G on the top there. And then we go B, D, F, B, D, F, A. So we have to draw an extra ledger line. That gives me that A note there. This is great if you can read the standard notation. You don't need to be able to read the standard notation to be able to do this, because if you know this cycle here, what we can do is we can translate that into this, which is what I did when I was at music college, because this, it's very much geared around piano. I'm a guitar player. I don't want to have to double think things. So here's what I did. The root note, this row here, it's the notes of my major scale. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then you can see I get back to C again, which is chord 1. So I can just go around these and I go C to E, using my cycle, C, E, G, B, C, E, G, B, and I'm not going to D because I don't want a ninth. D, F, A, C. Deserves, fans, and cash. Fans and cash. Every good band deserves. Face, we get that one. That's more standardized. Fans and cash, every. You can think about it whichever way you want. Good band deserves fans and cash, every good. B, D, F, A. So I've taken this here in music notation and I've put it here into a graph. It's another way of looking at it, but the whole crux of this was how to use these inverting intervals, because I got asked this in my group. If I take the root note here, and I'm going to add all these root notes up here, and I could do the same thing up here as well. So let's look, this is a C, and I could put it up here in standard notation, and sometimes this is a little bit easier to see than this at times. You can see that we've just basically added the same thing as a root note above here. This is going to be important because we're going to work out the distance between here and here instead of trying to work out the distance between here and here. It's easier to read this. Now, when I first started learning to read music, going from here, from the root note up to the seventh here, and then trying to figure out what kind of seventh it was difficult for me to get my eye in on that. So what I came up with was, well, if I put the root note on top and work out the smaller interval, and then I invert it, I can discover what kind of seventh I have. So let's do that here. So this would be the root note to the seventh. This would be the root note to the seventh of the E minor there. Root note of the F to the seventh. This is the G. Root note to the seventh. The A minor here. And then we're going to do the same on that B chord there. So on this one here, we've got between the C and this note here is a D. The interval between the C and the D. We've got to work this out. Let's just fill them in first though. So we get E, G, B, D, and then you can see that E sits lovely just there. F, A, C, E, and then we get an F here as well. G, B, D, F, and then we want to put another G on the top of that. Then we're going to go in this A minor. We're going to go A, C, E, G. That's a G. Remember, this is an A here, so we need to add that bad boy there. Hang on, let me put those brackets in there to show you that that's the interval we're going to look at here. Instead of working out what this big gap is and thinking to yourself, that's a fifth, that's a sixth, that's a seventh, but what kind of seventh is it? Because the seventh affects the triad that's underneath it. And then when we get from this one, we know that this note here is going to be a B, so we need to figure out what that interval is there. So when it comes to inverting intervals, we have 4 rules. Major becomes minor, minor becomes major. This symbol means vice versa, so it switches both ways. So if we have something that's a perfect interval, then it is going to be perfect again. Sharp becomes flat, flat becomes sharp. Everything has to add to 9. We're not going to probably need all these rules, but I just wanted to remind you how these work. And if you've not seen that video on the triads, just look at this one up here. We're looking at a string here. This is a fret, this is a fret. Now if we imagine we have our root note on our string, if we go back 1 fret, we get the major 7th. That's the major 7th. We just spell it with a 7. And if we go back another fret, we get the flat 7. That's the minor 7, that's the major 7. Now the way I see it is, that is a semitone. We've gone back a half step. If we go back another fret, then we go back a whole step. So that's a whole step and that's a half step. This is a crude terminology. If I go back 1, this is what I call a flattened root. And if I go back 2 frets, that's what I call a double flattened root. But let's look at it in this context here. If we go from a B to a C, we can think to ourselves that B to a C is a half step. And the terminology for a half step is a minor second. That's the interval name for it. A minor second is the same as a half step. And if we invert that, then what happens is minor becomes major. So we get a major. Now the thing is, everything has to add to 9. So 2, well, what's the remaining number that we need to make it add to 9? That's going to be a 7. So minor second equals a major 7th. So I can think to myself, this triad here is major, but the 7th here is going to be a major 7th. We put the triangle there to denote major. So this minor 2nd is just like going from the root note to this half step down here. This is going to enable you to find it on the string as well. So go down a half step to find that major 7. Now if we do the opposite of that, we get a tone or a step. This is a major 2nd, and if we invert that using the same rules, major becomes minor. Everything has to add to 9, so what's missing to make it up to 9? That's another 7. So you can see that if we have a major 2nd, what happens is we get a minor 7th. We also know that as a flat 7. These are the only 2 7ths we have, so if it works better for you to just memorize that a minor 2nd, if you invert it, becomes a major 7th. A major 2nd, if you invert it, becomes a minor 7th, which is equal to the flat 7. But what you can do is you can add it here and understand it as it works on the string itself. Let's take this here, root 3rd and 5th. This is a D minor chord. What we need to do is work out the distance between the 7th and that root note there, and we're going to invert it. So C to D is a step. So if it's a step, then it is a major 2nd. Put that there, step and half step. So if we have that step there, major 2nd, then that's telling us that what we've got on top of that is a minor 7th. I'm going to use this minor symbol there. So we've got a minor 7 for that chord. So that's D minor with a minor 7th. So we just call that D minor 7. Here in this C major with a major 7, we're not going to say major major, we just say major 7. So C major 7. Let's look at this chord here. This is chord 3, which we know to be minor from previous videos if you've watched those. So we've got an E minor. Let's work out from D to E. It's a step, guys, because all we have to do is remember B and C are next door neighbours, E and F are next door neighbours in the key of C, but obviously this is going to change if you add sharps or flats. But for this key, we just know that D and E is a whole step apart. A whole step is a major 2nd. If we invert that, that's going to tell us that it is a minor 7th. So we get an E minor with a minor 7, which means we get an E minor 7 chord. That's telling us the quality of the 7th. Let's look at the triad here. F, A, C. The distance between this E and this F is a half step. Half step, which is a minor 2nd, technical term for it. If we invert it, means we're going to get a major 7th. So let's put that in there. We get a major 7th chord there. So that's very interesting, I think. You can see here that chords 1 and chord 4 have major 7 chords. Chords 2, chords 3, they have minor 7 chords. Chord 5 is a special case because chord 5 is called the dominant. We've got the G triad here, so this is a major triad. But let's just look at this here. We have a whole step here. Now on C and the F, which were major triads as well, we got half steps, which meant that the 7th was a major 7th. However, on chord 5, what happens is between the F and the G, that major 2nd means that we get a minor 7th. That means that we have a major triad with a minor 7th, which gives us a little bit of a conundrum of how we work that out. The easiest way to think about it, guys, is that this just becomes a 7th chord. We don't put the triangle on there, that delta symbol there. We just know it as the 7th. When we harmonize up to 7th chords, that's where this rule changes with this triangle. If we were doing it as triads and it was just triad chords, we could use that as a way of remembering things. But for this instance, once we start getting up to 7th chords, we don't want to do that at all. So let's look at the next one. So we've got an A minor here. I'll just put that little M in there. Let's look at the distance between the G and the A. That's a whole step, which means we get a major 2nd. Flip that, invert it, we get a minor 7th. And that means we've got a minor chord with a minor 7. We don't say minor minor, we say minor once, so we get a minor 7 chord. Worth noting, chords 2, 3, and 6, the 3 minor chords in the key are always going to be minor 7th chords. Chords 1 and 4 are always going to be major 7th chords, and chord 5 is the odd one out there because that has this special thing going on with the flat 7 there. Now we've got to tackle this one. This is the diminished chord, and like I said before, B to D is a minor third, D to an F is a minor third. So what happens is, in between this B and the F, we get a flat 5. So already the chord is a bit of a conundrum. But let's just put that down there just so that you have that information. So we've got that flat 5, and we call that diminished. But when we add the 7th, something happens with this as well. Let's look at the kind of 7th that we have. We've got A to B. That is a full step. So if we have a step, then that's going to be a major second. Let's invert it. We get a minor 7th there, guys. But the thing is, we can't call it a minor 7th. What we have to do is we have to include this idea that it has a flat 5. So we put that in there as having a flat 5. Now, when we add this 7th, between the F and the A, that is a major third. It's not a minor third, which would mean the full whole diminished thing is happening. If you go from B to D, that's a minor third. D to F, that's a minor third. But F to A, that is a major third. If it was a minor third, this was an A flat, then this chord would be fully diminished. However, because we've got an A in there, it means we've got a flat 7. It means that the chord isn't fully diminished. It means it is half diminished. And we would write the symbol for that. We'd have that symbol there to mean diminished, which works in the triad because we've got a root flat 3rd and a flat 5th. Nothing needed extra there. But because of the way that this flat 7 works, what we have to do is say that it is half diminished. And that's the symbol. So if you come across that symbol there, that means half diminished. That's the symbol we would use there, guys. So I could have put this as just that above there and people would understand that's what that means there. So by using this way of using the smallest interval here, instead of working it out from the root note and trying to figure out, well, what's the distance between the root note and the 7th to figure out what kind of 7th it is, by inverting that interval, what we've managed to do is figure out the 7th using a smaller interval and then just inverting it. What I've done there, guys, is the same thing that you would do here in standard notation, but for my folks out there who don't read music, this is probably an easier way for you to see it and to understand how this works. And this is the thing as well, guys. You need to just memorize this sequence. You need to memorize the fact it goes major 7, minor 7, minor 7, major 7, dominant 7th or 7th, minor 7 flat 5, or half diminished. You have to memorize those things. That will help you massively as you are trying to work out chords on your guitar journey. Just knowing these things and knowing what shapes to play, because this all changes if you are 1 fret out. If you are 1 fret out, you are wrong. You are playing the wrong chord, and you can bet your bottom dollar if somebody knows what that chord should be, they are going to tell you. If you've enjoyed this lesson and you're interested in this idea of inverting intervals and you want to see the full lesson, then watch this video here and that will help you to understand this just a little bit better.